Assalamu alaikum everyone. So in this lecture we'll be starting the new chapter of economics. We'll begin with the 8th chapter today, that is public finance in India. We will begin with the introduction, meaning of public finance. Public finance is one of the old branches of economics which highlights the role and functions of the government in an economy. Government is a formal or informal institution created by the people in a specific region. It performs various functions such as protection from external attacks, protection of private property of the people, generation of employment, maintaining internal law, provision of social needs like education, health, and so on. Now, these functions of the government can be classified as obligatory functions or optional functions. Protection from external attacks, maintaining internal law and order are some of the obligatory functions of government. Whereas provision of education and health services, provision of social security like pensions are optional functions of the government. Both the categories of these functions together form the total role of government. Now we'll see the meaning and nature of public finance. To perform the above mentioned functions, that is obligatory and optional functions, adequately and efficiently, any government needs funds which can be received from various sources. The concept of public finance is a combination of two words, public and finance. Public is a collective word for the individuals living within an administrative territory. However, in economics, it is used to signify the government which represents the public. Finance simply means income and expenditure, and therefore public finance is nothing but a study of the principles of income and expenditure of the government at central, state, and local level. This study is done under public finance branch in economics. So when you are studying how the government spends its income or how the government expenditure is planned, you are studying public finance, and this public finance takes place at three levels: central, state, and local. So this role of the government is studied in economics. There are different definitions given by different economists. So according to Professor Shiraz, public finance is the study of the principles underlying the spending and raising of funds by public authorities. In simple words, when you are studying where does the government gets its income from, or when you are studying how does the government make expenditure, or on what products and services government spends its money, if you are studying these two concepts, you are studying public finance. Public finance is one of those subjects which are on the borderline between economics and politics. It is concerned with the income and expenditure of public authorities and with the adjustment of one with the other. Since we study the activities of the governments in political science too, public finance also constitutes a part of the study of political science. Since now we have studied what is public finance, moving forward we'll see the difference between public finance and private finance. Private finance is nothing but the financial structure or financial study of an individual. When you study the income and expenditure of the government, you are studying public finance. Similarly, when you study income and expenditure of an individual, then it is private finance. So we can see the distinguish between public finance and private finance. The first one is objective. The objective of public finance is to offer maximum social advantage to the society. It is the role of the government to take care of the social advantage or social scenario in terms of income and expenditure. Whereas the objective of private finance is to fulfill the private interests of an individual. The next point of difference is determination of expenditure. Government first determines the volume and different ways of its expenditure and then accordingly spends. However, an individual considers his income and then determines the volume of expenditure. So you can see the difference. Government first estimates what will be its expense and accordingly it finances its sources. But on the other hand, an individual will first see how much he earns and accordingly he will structure his finance or expenditure. The next point is credit status. High degree of credit in the market is given to public finance, whereas the credit of private individual is limited. Obviously, as far as income and expenditure or financial background is concerned, government will have more creditability as compared to an individual. Now, right to print currency. It is one of the major point of difference. The government can print notes through Reserve Bank of India. However, a private individual does not enjoy such right. An individual cannot print currency. Next point is elasticity of finance. Public finance is more elastic because government have more options. Government have more opportunities to raise finance as well as to spend it on different aspects in the society. Whereas private finance or individual finance does not have much scope. There is not much scope for changes in private finance. There are limited options available for an individual. And the last point of difference is effect on economy. Public finance have tremendous impact on the economy of a country. Obviously, it is the responsibility of the government to take care of the economy of the country. Therefore, public finance have major impact. And the impact of private finance is marginal or less as compared to public finance. The individual finance or private finance do impact the economy, but the effect on the national economy is not much as compared to public finance. Moving forward, there are different possibilities or different aspects of public finance. The structure of public finance can be broadly categorized into 5 types. The first one is public expenditure, second one public revenue, then public debt, fiscal policy, and financial administration. So these 5 categories majorly defines public finance. We'll study each category in detail in the lectures to come. As we have seen in the previous slide, the structure of public finance and the 5 major categories it is divided into, we'll study each category in detail now. So the first major point in the structure of public finance is public expenditure. What is public expenditure? Public expenditure is that expenditure which is incurred by the public authority. Public authority means the government at central, state, and local level. This public expenditure is made by the government for the protection of the citizens, for satisfying their collective needs, and for promoting their economic and social welfare. So when the government spends its income or makes an expense that is for the welfare of the people in their country or in their locality or in their state, then that expenditure is called as public expenditure. Up until 20th century, the majority of the governments had adopted a policy of laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means no government intervention. Under this policy, the functions of government were restricted to the obligatory functions only. But the modern governments today not only performs the obligatory functions such as defense and civil administration, but also performs optional functions for promoting social and economic development of their countries. And therefore, the study of public expenditure is an important part of the study of public finance. Classification of public expenditure. Government plans its expenditure broadly in 4 categories or on different bases. Different economists have classified public expenditure on different bases. We will study some of the important classifications of public expenditure. So the first classification is revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure of the government is incurred for carrying out the day-to-day functions of the government departments and various services. It is incurred regularly. The examples could be administration costs of the government, salaries, allowances and pensions of the government employees, or medical and health services, and so on. These expenses are done for the regular or day-to-day functioning of the government and hence are classified as revenue expenditure. It helps the government in earning revenue. The next classification is capital expenditure. Capital expenditure of the government is the expenditure for progress and development of the country. For example, huge investment in different development projects or loans granted to state governments or government companies or the repayment of government loans are all examples of capital expenditure. These expenditures help the government in the development of the country. It helps in the progress of the nation and therefore are classified as capital expenditure. The next category is developmental expenditure. Developmental expenditure is productive in nature. The expenditure which results in the generation of employment or increase in production, price stability is known as developmental expenditure. The examples could be the expenditure on health, education, industrial development or social welfare, research and development. All this expenditure are productive in nature. It helps the government in producing better results and therefore are classified or termed as developmental expenditure. The last classification or the basis of classification is non-developmental expenditure. The government expenditure which does not result in any direct productive impact on the country is called non-developmental expenditure. It is obligatory in nature and it is done irrespective of the circumstances. For example, the administration cost or the war expenditure or defense expenditure, it is done irrespective of any circumstances prevailing. It has to be done. It does not result in any direct productive development for the nation and yet it has to be done. These are unproductive in nature and therefore are classified as non-developmental expenditure. So these are the 4 broad categories of public expenditure, classification of public expenditure, that is revenue, capital, developmental and non-developmental expenditure. Whenever the government plans its expenditure, it categorizes its expenses in these four major categories or classifications and accordingly plans its income and expenditure policy. It is observed that there is a continuous growth in public expenditure in a developing country like India, and there are various reasons for such growth. We'll study the reasons for growth in public expenditure in the given slide. The first major reason is the increase in the activities of the government. As mentioned earlier, the modern government performs many functions for the social and economic development of the country. These functions include spread of education, public health, public recreation, social welfare schemes, and so on. It is observed that the new functions are continuously being undertaken and old functions are being performed more efficiently on a large scale by the government. This leads to increase in public expenditure. Another reason is the rapid increase in population. Population of developing countries like India is increasing fast. In 2011 census, it was 121 crores. As a result, the government has to incur greater expenditure to fulfill the needs of the increasing population. Higher the population, higher will be the expenditure. Another reason is the growing urbanization. Spread of urbanization is a global phenomenon of the day. This leads to increase in the government expenditure on water supply, roads, energy, schools and colleges, public transport, sanitation, and so on. As the urbanization increases, the government expenditure also increases on the public welfare. Next reason is increasing defense expenditure. In the modern times, defense expenditure of the government is increasing due to unstable and hostile international relationships. The country is constantly on the verge of war with different countries, and because of this, it has to maintain a certain level of defense system or defense provisions, and therefore the public expenditure, the expenditure of the government on defense or such war administration increases. Another reason is the spread of democracy. Majority of the countries in the world are democratic in nature. A democratic form of government is expensive due to regular elections and other activities. This results in the increase in total expenditure of the government. Another reason for the increase or growth in public expenditure is the rate of inflation. Just like a private individual, the government has to buy goods and services from the market for the spread of economic and social development. Normally, prices showing a rising trend, and due to this, the government has to incur increasing cost. Just as a common man or layman is facing the problem of price hikes, the government too faces this problem, and as a result, the public expenditure increases. Industrial development is another reason that leads to an increase in the public expenditure. Industrial development requires increase in production, employment, and overall growth in the economy. The government make huge efforts for implementing various schemes and programs for industrial development, and this results in increased government expenditure. The last reason is disaster management. Many natural and man-made calamities like earthquakes, floods, cyclones, social unrest are occurring more frequently. The government has to spend a huge amount for the disaster management, which increases the total expenditure. Modern governments are working for welfare state or for social welfare, and therefore there is a continuous increase in the public expenditure. With this, we have completed the first part of the structure of public finance. We'll see another part of the structure in next lecture. And that's all for this lecture. Thank you.